What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Scale Your Real Estate Podcast. I've got Rami with me today. Rami is a coach. He goes into companies and he coaches CEOs on how to turn their companies around. He finds companies that are stuck, small to medium-sized businesses. He coaches the boards of those companies and gets them to change their mindset, to change their tactics, to change their strategies. And so I do a deep dive into him. Now, I love personal development, so we kind of geek out for a little bit about mindset and personal development and what's the mindset it takes to be successful. And how can you be aware enough to change that mindset? Rami's got such a great heart. He's got tons of knowledge to drop in this area. Now, Rami also used to work for a bank that did $70 million a month in loans. And so he knows a little bit about banking and lending. And, so I kind of transition a little bit in the middle of this episode to talking about lending and to talking about how to get the best rates and how to negotiate and just his knowledge. And I pick his brain on that. And there's some absolute gold there. You got to watch that part or listen to that part. And then we end with a little bit of co-living, how and why he went all in on co-living, and what he believes is the future of co-living. This episode is just so fun. It was awesome. Now, I know Rami through Co-Living Master University. It's the program where I coach people to become financially free through co-living. And so enjoy this episode. Give us some feedback and reach out to Rami with additional questions. And guys, let's just dive right in here. Why is mindset first? Is that just what you found that like people, talk to me about why mindset is first.
Yeah. So it all starts with mindset. If you don't have the right mindset, nothing else matters. Because if you can't put yourself in a growth mindset, you can't come up with a tactical plan to grow. Right?
Good point.
Right. So you have to level set on mindset first and get everybody on the same train of thought and open to doing things differently, to accepting the unconventional, to taking bigger risks, whatever the kind of mindset that's needed for that company, right? You start there. And then once people kind of embrace that, then you can start to work through the other things.
So how? I'm just curious how. Like, okay, so I'm a coach too in a lot of ways, right? Mm-hmm. You're a coach, mm-hmm. You coach CEOs, you coach boards of companies.
Yeah.
If you find that a board of a company or a certain team member is just stuck in a mindset, what are some strategies that you use? Like, how do you get them to make that shift?
So two things, right? One is we think that just because, every company is different, does different things and whatever else that, everybody's problems are different. The reality is because we're all human, all our problems are exactly the same. Right. So this is kind of like one of the first things that I really learned after working with a lot of companies is that when you boil it down, we all have the same fears, right? We all have the similar ambitions. Like we all have the same things because we're all human. And so you approach it from that perspective. So normally the first thing that I do is I bust whatever myth they're holding on to. Right. So you've got blockers that shape your mindset. Right. So the trick is to break those blockers. We talk, when we're doing the coaching and we talk about raising capital. Right. We say one of the myths we bust is that money is everywhere. It's not just in this tiny little corner that no one has access to, right? There's money everywhere, and you have to get over that hurdle of saying I don't have access to capital, right? You can go out and you can find it, and so you got to find the myth that's holding that team back, those individuals back, and then you bust that myth, and then you back that up with some real world evidence. Look, here are some other people that are similar to you that have overcome that myth, right? And you provide them with that evidence so that they can get out of their own head and out of their own way, right? And over that hurdle, and then you can move forward.
It's fascinating. Do you believe it's possible for someone to do that without a coach? And that's a real question because I'm thinking like maybe even somebody listening to this, they're thinking like, okay, cool, I don't have a coach, or I don't know, maybe they can't afford a coach. Maybe that's even a limiting belief. They can't afford a coach, right? Or whatever. Or, or I even think about this in my own life. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of hitting this ceiling in my life. I'm hitting this threshold. And how do I coach myself out of this threshold? Do you believe that that's possible? And if so, how would somebody do that on their own?
I think on your own, it's really, really tough. I think on your own, it's really, really tough. And look, like even if you don't hire a coach, right? Like you might be able to do it through like reading books and having your coach be the author, right? You like there may be other ways to do it, but it's really, really difficult to do on your own. And here's something that I talk about that some because I run into resistance sometimes with CEOs, especially, right? Who say, I don't need a coach, right? I'm super successful. I'm running this huge company. Like, I don't really need a coach. And the thing that I always remind people of is two things, right? One is, did Michael Jordan not need a coach?
Dang, that's good.
Right? Like even the best athletes in the world, the ones who are performing at their absolute top peak, all have coaches. That's why they're performing at the top peak. Right. And it actually goes absolutely the same with business. There was a book that released maybe 2-3 years ago, right, called The $1 Billion Coach. And it's about this guy who coached all of the massive companies in Silicon Valley. Right? I mean, we're talking about all of them: Google, Apple, Oracle. Like, this guy was the coach to the cream of the crop of the companies for years. Because we all need to be coached on something. There's no such thing as there's nothing to learn. And even if you're super self-aware, somebody's outside perspective will shift your thinking, because we all develop blind spots.
Even in my own life, I found you said someone's outside perspective, and it could also be like their outside belief. Like if they believe, there's something powerful about being around somebody that believes something is possible that I may have just never thought was possible before. I didn't even think it was a limiting belief, but let's just say, for example, I get around one of my friends and they're my age, or, they're a young guy too. And they're like, I have 1,000 units. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't even know that was possible, just like, it's almost like Hal Elrod wrote the book, The Miracle Morning. He talks about borrowing someone else's belief. Like if you don't believe it, like you can borrow someone else's belief in that vision or goal or something like that. Do you find that belief in your mind is beliefs and mindset similar, or are those kind of different? Are those different categories? Or if I expand my belief system, is that pretty much the same thing as saying like expanding my mindset?
Yeah, I think they're probably super closely related, right? There's probably like a 90% overlap. One of the things I like to say is strong beliefs loosely held, right? So having a strong opinion on something is okay, but you should always be willing to have that opinion changed when presented with new data, new ideas, new whatever, right? So don't be afraid of letting go of what you know if better things come along and there's a different way to think about it. So you should be open to both kind of all the time.
I love that.
Strong beliefs, loosely held.
Loosely held. Hey, this is my strong opinion in the moment.
Yeah.
But it could change tomorrow if you change my mind.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's a nugget. That's a great way to think about it. So many people, I think, feel like their beliefs are them. Do you find that like, hey, my beliefs are me? Like if you attack my beliefs, you're attacking me. You're attacking. And what I almost hear you saying is like, no, like that's not you. That's just something you believe. Am I right about that? How would you describe that? Like, why do people get so defensive about something they think is, them?
Yeah. I mean, fascinating question, right? We get to a point where we think if this is what I believe, this is what I do. And if this is what I do, this is who I am. Right? So often we introduce ourselves as, hi, my name is Rami. I'm an engineer. Hi, my name is Steve. I'm a doctor, right? It's like the things that we do, the things that we believe define who we are. But I think if you can dissociate yourself from that, right? If you say, no, I am who I am, and what I believe and what I do are a part, they're not the whole, then as an engineer, I can be open to becoming a business person, right? As an engineer, I can decide to do whatever. right? I can find another path. It doesn't define me and then make me get stuck in a box. So,
Wow.
and it's especially true of your beliefs and your approach to thinking about things, right? If you believe that the only way to accomplish a job is by using a hammer, right? You're going to really limit what you can build.
So there's value in expanding how you define yourself, is what I'm hearing you say.
100%.
That's
100%.
huge.
Yeah.
Rami, do you find that there are commonalities to so you go into these companies and I'm sure, there you see some people who are really crushing it. And like you said, everybody has something to work on, but are there commonalities to failure? And are there commonalities to success that you've noticed? Like, hey, this is just, and I'm saying that I'm asking this question very selfishly because I want to see if I have any of the commonalities for failure.
Yeah.
Because I'm a growth mindset person. So I'm always like, hey, I don't want to be headed down the wrong path. So I'm just curious if you kind of notice any things that are like, hey, this kind of, I see this pattern. I guess what I'm asking for is more patterns. Like, do you notice a pattern of a company or a business or a person that's stuck? Right. And then do you notice patterns or of a person, of a company and somebody who's like on this path to success? And the reason I'm asking is because I want the listeners to take away like, man, if you can be aware of some of these patterns, then you can either change them yourself or hire a coach like you've talked about, and make that difference. But awareness of it, I feel like, is such a first step.
Yeah, no. And there's definitely a pattern. And there are two big things that are inevitably almost always present in companies that are really, really struggling. The first one is the lack of learning. So they're not spending any time learning what's happening on the outside, how their customers are changing, how their customers are shifting, what's happening in their industries. They have a purely inwardly view of this is what we believe, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it.
They have strong beliefs, strongly held.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes. So that's the number one. That's the number one thing, is that there's zero learning happening.
Would you almost call that like selfish? Like when you said inward, I just thought of I thought of an individual. I thought to make the comparison of like that at an individual level would be just somebody who walks through life like all they think about is themselves. It's all about them, and it's just like blinders to anybody else's feelings, emotions, thoughts, what they want. Is that selfish is the word that came up for me. I don't know if that resonates, but
when it's at a company level, it has less to do with selfishness. It has more to do with fear. They become worried that if they go out and learn things that don't align with their worldly view, their beliefs, they don't know what to do with that. Wow. Right? That is to them, that is so scary, right? That the customer might want something new, or that the industry might be shifting in a way that they don't know how to handle, that they just close the doors and sit in their comfortable place.
So it's like fear of the unknown?
It's the fear of the unknown. And it's the fear of change, right? It's the fear of change.
Wow. And that's an individual thing too. Like that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's the first big thing. The second is, and they kind of go hand in hand, right? Is that whatever problem they're trying to solve, they're going at it alone. They're reinventing the wheels, right? Every time. And so it takes longer, it takes more money, if they make mistakes that have already been solved, right? And so you look and you're like, wait a minute, guys, like there's one company that I was working with recently, and they were essentially building a CRM from scratch. I'm like, guys, it costs $50 to go get like HubSpot. Like what is happening, right? And the part that, I help them pay attention to is, but there's always a justification for why those people, the way those people do it is not the right way for them, because we're so unique, right? Or that solution doesn't quite solve what I want because our process is so unique, right? And it's like, just maybe, get over yourself a little bit, right? Change your process slightly and speed up 100%, right? Wow. Instead of doing that. And it all comes back to this mindset idea of, if I need to change, I should be able to.
So let's say and we're going deep on this, and then I want to move to lending a little bit here.
Yeah.
But this is fascinating. This is fascinating. I'm glad we had you and I have never had this talk. Like, this is deep. This is big. This is good stuff. So suppose someone listening to this recognizes that they have one of two of these fears or both.
Yep.
They're going at it alone. And
Yep.
by the way, I can definitely think of times in my life where I've gone at it alone. For that same similar reason of like, well, I'm different. And, of course. And like you said, you actually started this podcast off by saying like, we're all humans and we have the same problems. Like, we actually aren't as unique as we think we are in the human world. So let's say someone listening kind of like let's say what you just shared was a light bulb moment for them. Like it kind of was for me. I was like, wow, those are powerful, powerful lessons. What advice would you have for somebody who's like, damn, I want to change? I get that. That is kind of how I'm acting, maybe in my business, maybe in my family, maybe my relationships, maybe just as an individual. I have a lack of learning, and it's because of fear of the unknown or fear of change. That's so powerful to me. It's because of this inward view, and I'm going at it alone. I'm thinking I have to reinvent the wheel and create solutions to every problem I'm facing on my own, which I see all the time, by the way. And it could be in even relationships. Like someone's facing a relationship problem. It's like, oh no, you don't understand. Like my wife is this way and I'm this way. And it's like, bro, like there's billions of people on this earth. Like people have faced this problem before. Like you're not as unique. So let's say that's a light bulb moment for someone. What advice do you have for them to get out of those or to change that, or, assuming they want to?
The first way to break the pattern is, we talk about this a little bit when we're coaching people, right? Is kind of go fish where the fish are. So whatever thing that you do, right? Whether you weave baskets or you got your own bank, like whatever it is, right? It doesn't really matter. The first way to change is to surround yourself by people who are doing what you do, because inevitably other people are doing it differently, right? So that's the first thing, because that's probably the easiest way to see that, oh, look, these other people are having success and they do it differently than I do. Right. So that's the first thing. Surround yourself by people who are doing what you're doing successfully. Having a coach will increase your speed in that realm 5 to 10x. Because here's the thing that a coach does that other influences and other spheres of influence don't, is that they can help hold you accountable to yourself. Right. And it's one thing to be, part of a group of people who are all doing the same thing that I'm doing. But having a coach gives you just enough of that hand in the back support and push that we tend to need to take that first step.
Yeah, man, that's good stuff. I really think that's going to help a lot of people in just kind of stepping outside of themselves and recognizing that they need to step up to a new level. So that's really awesome. I'd like to transition a little bit, because I know you've had, this is a real estate podcast ultimately, even though we just went hardcore into like personal development and mindset, but all of that is so critical. As you said, if we don't have that growth mindset, we don't have the right mindset, then all the tactics and strategies, like what's the point, So tell us a little bit about your experience in lending. And what I really want to know, and I wanted to share this story because, I consider you a friend. We know each other through Co-Living Master University. And you posted the other day that you got this rate, an interest rate on a home that you're buying, a co-living home that you're buying. And I just remember being kind of flabbergasted. I was like, how in the hell is this guy getting this rate? And so I've selfishly, for my own reasons, have wanted to pick your brain on this, but I'm glad we can have this conversation publicly and other people can learn about just some tips and tricks to getting loans on properties. And obviously in the real estate world, it's like we do real estate because we can get leverage on it, right? But gosh, the difference between a 5% loan and an 8% loan, is a pretty significant difference when it comes to how much I'm going to pay in interest over the years, how much my payment is every month, how much cash flow I'm going to make. Like, it changes the game. And I think lending, I didn't realize how important lending was until recently. I just thought a loan officer is a loan officer is a loan officer. But I don't know. Maybe you can hopefully coach us through that. So I'd love to hear what's been your experience in lending And what would you say is some tips or tricks to finding a good lender to start off with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, let me give you a little background on my experience first, and then we'll dive into that question. So I worked as the director of operations for a smallish, investment bank. Right, we did mortgage-backed securities, so we did the front end lending, right, working directly with consumers as well as with brokers. And then we would take the loans. We did about $70 million a month in lending, and then we would take that, securitize it, and sell it to a much bigger bank, and do the same thing the next month, right? And being in ops, it meant that every single loan that we did passed through my desk, right? Every single loan. So we did deep dives, and we lent to regular single family purchases, multi units up to 4, jumbo loans, a ton of subprime at the time, right? Was really big, and so on and so on. So I got quite a bit of a flavor in understanding the different programs that are out there, and that they're not built the same, right? We worked with a lot of banks on the back end. We had something like 45 different lenders that we worked with. So we had 45 different options on how to structure a loan in order to be able to securitize it, right? So through that experience, I really got to learn that not all loans are the same. Not all banks are looking for the same things, which means that your options aren't as simple as sometimes the industry makes it out to seem, right? Where they say, oh, it's a conventional loan. Every conventional loan is exactly the same. It's like, no, it isn't, right? Not at all. So the trick to finding a good bank is, I think for me, has 2 things. Number one is they need to have, and I put this one first, right? They need to have good loan officers who actually know what they're doing.
How do you know if they have good loan officers?
Yeah, it's
$1 million question.
It's a really good question. It's a really good question. I think that you learn if they're good or not if you can ask them about the process. So this is what I normally do when I talk to a bank that I'm considering to do a loan with. Right, when I talk to the loan officer, my first question is, tell me how your process works. Right. And then I listen to how well they describe their involvement in what happens. And so banks where, they say, oh, well, I take your information, I put it into the system, and then I give it to, it goes off to whoever, and then, you work with them to do, like, that's not a good loan officer. That's an order taker, right? They just fill out a form, and everything else is happening in the background. I'm looking for banks where they're like, well, first I figure out what it is that you're trying to do, right? I understand your needs. Then we go through and we figure out, okay, what are you buying and where? And then, then we figure out what kind of program is going to be the best one for you. So when somebody described the process that way, they're looking for what I want to do so that they can help me do that, versus, oh, you already know what you want to do. Let me just take your order and get my check. Right. So that's the difference for me between the process. So it's having a good loan officer. And then the second thing I ask them is how many different programs do they have that they can put my loan through? That question is actually getting tougher and tougher for people to answer as banks become more and more automated, and they don't have as much visibility as to what's happening behind the software. But it's not everywhere yet, and it's something that I still ask. And it's a little bit of hit and miss, but at least it gives me a gauge of what's happening. And then the third thing is how quickly they respond to me, right? How engaged are they in helping me do what I do? Because as you know, things move fast. They move fast and slow, right? Like real estate is fast and slow. But when things are moving fast, they move very fast. And you need somebody who can, if your deal is falling apart for whatever reason, you need somebody who's going to be on top of things and help you figure it out and help you move through it. If it takes them 3 days to respond just to a, hey, please give me a rate quote, you're done. Like, I've moved on, right? Like, I may have already signed with another bank already. Like, 3 days is no good. So it's about understanding the process, being focused on me, not on what they do, and then speed.
Yeah, man, that resonates a lot with me. I think one of my biggest complaints with my lender that I'm using right now, that I have used in the last, is just his response time. It's like I'll text him twice, and it's when you're moving fast. That's such a great way of putting it. When things move fast, they need to move fast, and you need someone that's on it to save you. Yeah, that's amazing. There's a certain amount of intimidation out there, I've found, at least amongst new investors. Maybe they have a property or two, about like I feel like all my friends who are like getting into real estate, I've got to really, really encourage them to go talk to lenders. And I don't know why there's an intimidation. I think it's because, I don't know, maybe it's the fear of rejection. Oh, maybe the loan officer will tell me I can't buy a house, or maybe, but one of the things I encourage people to do, and I'm curious if you agree with this strategy or if you have a better strategy, I'm open to that. But I usually just tell people, like, look, go talk to 10 lenders, and just like, and I try to remind people that they make money by selling you a loan. Like, don't be intimidated to talk to a lender. Like, just call them, send them your stuff, and go talk to a bunch, because they may or may not say yes or no, but hey, at least like you'll get a best option. What advice would you have for someone who's kind of getting into real estate? They're a little maybe intimidated about talking to a lender, to have to send them all their docs. They don't, it's like fear of the unknown, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
What's the process look like? How would you overcome that for somebody?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really good question. So here's the thing. One is, if you're actually going to go into real estate, right, this is something that you're just going to have to learn to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you can't say that I want to become a singer, but I'm afraid to go up on stage. Like, no, you're gonna have to go up on stage, right? You're just gonna have to do it. So that's one thing we got to get over. I think it's one of those things that becomes easier the more you do it, right? Like practice. So this is number one. I think the fear, to be honest with you, comes from banking tends to be one of the most nebulous, least explained concepts, right? And so when people don't understand something, there's a hesitancy to go into that. So, which actually, the more you talk to banks, the more you'll learn. So, which is right, a perfect reason to do that. One of the things I tell people is, you're the customer, right? You're the customer. You should be in control of the process, just like doing anything else. So that's one. And then the other thing is, I only send docs, or even allow them to pull my credit after they've given me a quote. So, banks intimidate people all the time, saying, well, I can't do anything for you without being able to pull your credit. Right? And I tell them, look, if this is how difficult it is to work with you now, like I'm just finding information, right? But like, if this is the ultimatum, then thank you. And I walk away and I'm done. So
that's great.
Because you know what happens, right? You can't just let every bank pull your credit at will, because then you'll never get a loan. So no one gets to pull my credit until they've given me a rate that I'm happy with. And look, I know that there's a little bit of a grain of salt there, right? Because it's not until they have a full view of my credit that they'll be able to confirm that quote. But I make sure I get that info in an email, because it's so easy, right, to say, oh yeah, I'll give you 5% and your credit score can be whatever, and it's all fine. And then they pull your credit and they're like, well, actually your credit score is a touch lower, and so now the rate's 1% higher. And then you're like, but you told me before. They're like, well, I don't remember. And you know what I mean? Like, so make sure that it doesn't need to be on official letterhead or whatever else, right? But just get a record of that conversation is really important.
And you can also, you can estimate your credit for them, can't you? Like, hey guys, I think I'm pretty close to a 720 or whatever. They can plug in a number, right?
There's a ton of places online where they give you your credit score for free, right? And your credit profile for free, right? I get mine from Mint, right? Mint.com. I'm signed up to Mint.com. Yeah.
Credit Karma.
I go, I check it, right? And I tell them, look, I should be in this band. I know that I don't have any lates. I know that I don't have bankruptcy. I can give them all the information they need, right? And they can proceed accordingly.
Yeah. That's a great strategy, man. I think what you just shared does make it a little bit more. I like how you shared what you shared, because I feel like it does put the customer in the driver's seat. And I think that's what I want people to take away from this is like when you're going after a bank, you're the customer, you're in the driver's seat, and shop it like you'd shop anything else that you're spending. I mean, think about it. If you get a loan, like you're paying a couple $100,000 in interest over the lifetime of that loan. So like you're making a couple $100,000 purchase. So go shop and recognize that they're making a ton of money off of you, and they 100% need to be working in your favor and trying to give you that loan. And if they aren't, like you're saying, Rami, if they aren't, they're the wrong person. Go find someone else.
Yeah. And we're lucky in the US that we have so many options for banks, right? It's not like that elsewhere in other countries. Like Canada has like 5 major banks, right? And that's it. So, right, in the US, we have hundreds of banks we can choose from. So why wouldn't we go out and find our best option? Like, why wouldn't you do that? It's in your best interest.
Right.
Right.
That's a good, I didn't know that. That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah. We're super lucky here that we have all these options.
Let me ask you this question. Do you have any strategies for once, let's say you get a quote, you reach out to a few lenders. I wanted to drop this in here too, because a lot of people will ask like where to find lenders. And like, I think referrals are a great place. Jumping in, real estate investment groups on Facebook are a great place. Googling at some level can be, I guess, good. But let's say someone does find 4 or 5. They reach out to all of them. They take that courage. They're out there. They're putting their numbers out there. They don't let any of them pull their credit. They use your advice until they until they get a quote. What strategies do you have? Can you negotiate with lenders, A? And B, if so, how? And what strategies do you have for that?
So the answer, can you negotiate? Absolutely. You can absolutely negotiate, right? Now, negotiating will depend on a few key things, right? It'll depend on the bank itself. It'll depend on the current state of the market, right? So I was able to negotiate really well because when interest rates went up, loans took a dive and the banks are starving for loans. So they don't have as much negotiating power as when the interest rate is super low. And if if it's not you, it'll be the next person. And I've got, a full pipeline, etc. So I used, I'm using that to my advantage. And having some data, right, to be able to negotiate with is really good. So if you are able to show them, hey, I have a 0-cost loan from here, match that, or can you beat that? And have them have banks negotiate against each other, right? Like 100%. And it's not just on closing costs. It can be on anything. It can be on rate. It could be on the points. It could be on terms. Like there is negotiation to be had, because this idea of, it is what it is and I can't do anything about it. It's not true.
So what do you do? Do you just go and ask so you would actually, okay, so you just told me, so you'd try to get another quote that's better in maybe just at least one area, like, hey, it's got a lower interest rate or it's lower closing costs. And you'd show them that and be like, can you please beat this?
Yeah.
Is that a good strategy?
Yeah, and that's just the starting point. A negotiation is about give and take, right? You can't just take, because that's not a negotiate. That's not a negotiation. So with the loan that I'm doing now, they gave me the quotes all at 20%, and they were all at 7 or so. And I said, fine. I said, here's what I want to do. I'm going to put an extra 5% down, but you're going to give me 5.75 instead. And they were like, no. I was like, yes. and we kept arguing and figuring ways to do it, right? And taking from here, taking from there, and we got the deal structured. So
that's great.
Yeah. So and originally I wanted a low rate because I really wanted to have a good cash flow from the property, and they were like, oh, just buy it down with points. And I'm like, no. I'm not going to give you the money as a fee, right? If I'm going to pay that money anyway, let me put it into the equity in the property instead of just paying it out in fees. right? At least this way, I get to keep the money, right? I get to lower the risk. But again, these conversations, like one bank may be able to do that, may be able to flex it like that. Another bank may not have that flexibility in that program, so they may not be able to. And that's why you need to talk to a lot of banks so that you can figure out where's the best spot for structuring this deal.
Wow, that's brilliant. That's so brilliant. So anybody listening, you can negotiate. You have to ask. There's give and take. And if you get those multiple quotes without them pulling your credit, key point, right, Rami, is, and then start playing them off each other a little bit. That's great. Well, Rami, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to transition to co-living, man.
Yeah.
Because you're a CEO, coach, lending, expert turned co-living investor, and I'm so excited to have been on that journey with you. Rami and I met through a program that I'm happy to run. What really made you interested in co-living, and what was it about co-living that pushed you over the edge for you to be like, I'm going all in, this is my investment strategy?
So for me, it was two things, right? In all the work that I do, I'm always interested in doing things that are good for the world, right? So like there are industries that I don't go into, just because they do things that are either not good for the environment, not good for people, right? Yeah. Like I can spend my energy doing good for the world. I'm going to do that instead of doing things that are not so good for the world. So that, just as part of who I am and what I do, is an important part for me. So keeping that in mind, when I was looking at, I was investing in real estate already, right? And as I became more serious about it, because once you start and you get that bug, it just, you're like, okay, well, I want to do the next one, and I want to do the next one, and then you start to think about investing in real estate differently. And I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to start thinking about it like a business, not a side hobby. And that's when I found Bigger Pockets. I was like, let me go and hang out where the people who do the thing that I want to do hang out, right? So I went onto Bigger Pocket, and I just started to get more involved. And I'm just looking at, the million different ways that you can invest in real estate, right? And the thing that I was really mindful of was, I want to do better from cash flow perspective from my properties, because I was buying single family homes and renting them out, long-term rental, typical thing. And I had done the math, and I was like, in order for me to retire, it's going to take me like 20 homes, right? And if I buy one a year, it'll take me 20 years. I'm like, oh my God, right? I got to do something better than this. And when I came across your Bigger Pocket podcast, right, that talked about two things. It was better cash flow and solving the housing crisis. And I was like, that's the one. This is what I'm going to do. And I've been on that bandwagon ever since, focused and doing that. So I waited till my lease is finished, sold the properties, right? I took out the cash. We're reinvesting in co-living, right? Like, just all in.
That's awesome, man. You and I are I think it's one of the reasons I just get along with you so well, is you and I are really aligned in that. I want to invest in things that make a difference. I got invited to participate in like a vape shop. And I use this example a lot, but it was, one of my friends invested, and I don't have anything against anybody who vapes, but I just don't believe it's like changing people's lives for the better, right? It's like making it. And so I was just like, it was an easy investment to say no to because of that, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so being a social entrepreneur is I think it's a trend that's on the rise. People want to invest in things and then put their head to bed at night knowing like I made a difference with my money today. I didn't just go invest it only for money.
Right.
So
right.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Because, if, and this is one of the things that I believe for myself, but I talk about it with the people I coach as well. If you only do things for the money, if your company has no purpose other than just to squeeze out profits, you will eventually go bankrupt. Because money is the byproduct of the thing that you do.
Dang, that's good.
Right? So you have to have a mission, and it's the mission that drives you. It's the mission that keeps you creative. It's solving the problem that keeps you excited. And if you do that really, really well, the money will follow. But if you're just focused on money, the money eventually dries up because you've got nothing driving.
Wow. I'm writing this one. If you only care about the money, you will eventually go bankrupt because money is a byproduct of having a mission.
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, exactly. It's the byproduct of having a mission.
Wow. That's a mic drop moment right there. That's good. I needed to hear that. For somebody listening to this and they're wondering what the future of co-living is, what do you believe the future of co-living is? If I were to ask you 5 or 10 years down the road for co-living,
I think it'll become much more ubiquitous and much more known, the same way that Airbnb is today, right? Like today, when you say Airbnb, you don't need to explain anything, right? Everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows how it works. Everybody has done it, right? And I think co-living is on that same journey. We're just starting, and I say starting, the concept has existed for a super long time, right? Actually, I was in Phoenix the last couple of days, and I was having dinner with a few people, young professionals, right? And for the workshop that I was hosting for them, and 2 of them are living in co-living properties right now in Europe. And so, of course, then I put my co-living hat on, and then I went, I asked them like a million questions, and so we had a really good conversation. But it's one of those things that has so many benefits, right? Because I asked them, I said, so, you could have rented, you could afford to rent an apartment on your own, right? So why did you do a co-living thing? And here's what one of them said. He said, number one is I moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone. He's like, so having a community of people built into where I live was going to be important. The second thing, they were like, yeah, I could get an apartment on my own, but this is much more economical. So I actually get a lot more money that I can either spend on just doing things in that new city, right? And getting some experience as opposed to just going home at the end of the day and not having any money to do anything. And they were like, it was just about having that freedom and that flexibility to be able to do these things. So,
right. Wow.
Yeah, the benefits are aside from the investing side, the benefits for the people who actually live in co-living properties is so big. Like, I think people way underestimate the importance of living with other people. Yeah. We're social animals, right? Like, isolation is not good.
Man, that's a solid way to end this episode. I mean, that is incredibly, incredibly inspiring. And I just want to thank you for your wisdom. I mean, your wisdom in coaching, super. I got a page of notes, bro. So very inspiring. The lending, I think those tips for sure will help somebody out there who's maybe sensitive or wondering about how to take that next step and then diving into co-living. And I really appreciate your admonition is what I'm, it's like, hey, like you can focus on the money, but the mission, money is a byproduct of a mission. That's something I'm going to be pondering for a long, long time. So that's absolutely, men. Great having you on the show today. Yeah. And it was awesome because we just started talking and we just dove right into it. Normally I do a little intro and whatever, but I'll do that separately so people just hear it coming from me of who you are and what you mean to me. And couldn't agree more with you about putting your money in somewhere. And it's just nice to know that it's also this whole conversation we just had about it's nice to know like, hey, I'm investing, but who knows what the bank is investing it in if you do give it to them, like with you, at Absolutely. Least it's like, hey, this is going to be invested into co-living. That's going to be solving a problem. And by the way, I just heard, I don't know. I just heard, and I was doing some research. We're 7 million affordable housing units short in the United States. 7 million.
Yeah.
Is what they need to build. And that's why they're calling it a crisis, is because it's like, you just can't go build 7 million units. Like that's billions and billions of dollars, not to mention the upkeep, not to mention the subsidies. Like, so what we're doing is an entrepreneurial way to solve that. And you're right there, man. Thanks for being on the mission. That's beautiful. That's absolutely
Thanks,
beautiful.
Sam. Thank you for having me.